Good afternoon. I'm Daylin Fortney, and I manage social media for the Managing Partner Forum. Welcome to the MPF webinar series, a series of quarterly one-hour panel discussions on important leadership topics. These programs are moderated by John Remsen, Jr., President and CEO of the Managing Partner Forum and President of the Remsen Group. Today's session, What Every Managing Partner Needs to Know About Law Firm Networks, and our panel brings three different perspectives about law firm networks, affiliations, and similar groups. Handouts for today's sessions are found in the GoToWebinar window on the right of your screen. They're also hosted at managingpartnerforum.org. Throughout today's session, feel free to type your questions into the chat window. Questions will be answered as time allows. Finally, we'd like to remind you that today's session is recorded and will be archived on the Managing Partner Forum website. Thank you again for joining us. Over to you, John.
Well, thank you, Daylin, and welcome, everyone. We're glad you're here to explore the topic of law firm networks and affiliations. We have a great panel on board to share with us their perspectives on how to find the right one, how to plug in and achieve the most return on your investments of time and money into your law firm network. I'm a big proponent of these and am often counseling to smaller and mid-sized firms. There's 170 of them out there and more coming along each day, and we're delighted to have a panel, three representatives of three of the more established and successful law firm networks. As Daylin mentions, our session's being recorded and will be archived on the Managing Partner Forum website, so be sure to check us out and give us your evaluations as well, because we really do value that feedback. We find that about 40% of smaller and mid-sized law firms have found their way to a law firm network, and we anticipate that about half of our audience are looking for a network. About half of our audience may have found a network and is here to learn how to achieve the most. Great panel, as I mentioned. Most of you guys know me. I've been working with law firms for about 30 years and consulting for the last 25 years, and started the Managing Partner Forum in 2002 to help firm leaders be more successful in a very challenging and often ill-defined role. Our panel today, an outstanding group. We have Chris Cervellera. He's the Executive Director at TAGLaw. TAGLaw has about 160 member law firms, 10,000 lawyers, 90 countries. Chris is in law school right now, serves as Executive Director of this network, which also has a group of accounting firms affiliated with it called TAIAG, the International Accounting Group. Chris, welcome.
Thanks, John.
And joining Chris and myself is John Husband. John is the Vice Chair of Terralux. Terralux is a Miami-based network, about 600 law firm offices in 100 countries, representing about 19,000 lawyers. John's the Vice Chairman of the group and is also the past chair of the Denver-based law firm of Holland & Hart. John's an employment lawyer, got his law degree from the University of Toledo and a bachelor's degree from Ohio State University. Welcome, John.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning, and certainly not least, we did these alphabetically. So Tanna, M is the third letter, and so we were pleased to welcome you as well. Tanna is the President and CEO of Meritas, and Meritas currently has about 180 member law firms representing some 7,400 lawyers in 240 legal markets. Tanna has an interesting background in marketing, business development, working with consumer packaged goods as well as technology. She has her MBA from Dartmouth College. So Tanna, welcome to you as well.
Good to be here.
Before we get started, here's some demographic information. We're big on polling managing partners, and in 2015, we tossed a question to about 165 law firm leaders asking, have they found a network? We find about 40% yes, about 56% no, 3% were actively looking. So that's some interesting information to consider. And before we jump into today's conversation, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to tell us a little bit about their networks and what distinguishes it from the other 170 of these type organizations out there in the market. So Tanna, let me kick off with you to tell us a little bit about Meritas and what makes it different from other networks.
Thank you, John. Meritas as a network was founded, we're headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota in the U.S. We were founded in 1990, and we were founded as a safe place to refer clients by a lawyer here who had had a bad experience with a walk down the hall and ask your partner request for a firm in a jurisdiction he did not know anyone. And the inspiration was really about creating a network of firms that you could trust in terms of the quality of their work, which includes both the service and the legal work and how they respond. What that meant is that in 1990 we put in place a peer review or quality assurance monitoring process, which was very unique then and now in the legal profession. Our firms are adamant about doing peer review, we monitor every referral that is inbound into our firms, and we ask for feedback from the referring attorney, client, or member firm. And we know that that is a unique process in the legal profession, and I have to confess that we could not start that today because we all get too many surveys, but it is part of our culture. It has done two things for us: created a culture of trust within the membership of our firm and with us and the clients that use Meritas. And clients actually talk to me frequently about that and having a quality assurance process to help them understand how they can use a network as an alternative to a global law firm successfully. That quality process that we have is key. And I would consider that as being our core differentiator.
Excellent. Thank you, Tanna. And let me turn now to you, John Husband. Tell us a little bit about Terralux and what makes it different than the other networks in the market.
Yeah, we were one of the first networks to form, so we're older and more mature, but we also got the first pick of the law firms around the world because we got in early. As you mentioned, we're 19,000 attorneys and 600 offices around the globe. I think in 3 bullet points, I can sum up exactly what Terralux is and what they offer. It's global expertise, local connections, and seamless service. We are very careful on selecting our firms. We put a lot of effort on the front end to make sure there aren't problems on the back end, and I'm sure everybody listening knows that, you know, good hires make great lawyers at your law firms, and bad hires make problems at your law firms. Well, we believe in that totally, so we're very careful in how we select our members. With some of the marketplace moves that are going on now, we've had some of our member firms go to some of the national firms, and I can say that it's interesting when we do have an opening how firms want to join Terralux because of the quality of the firms we have. But we really rely on larger firms that have a broad range of business and legal counsel. Because we're one of the older networks, our members really know and trust one another. And we really adhere to our member service standards that every firm has to agree to. And like Tanna just said, we also have reviews. In fact, I'm going through the reviews now with our North American members where we call and get the managing partner, the head marketing person, and the Terralux reps on the phone, and we go through a long questionnaire about how the network's working, how we can be better, what their experience has been, and we take a lot of pride in that too. So that sums up Terralux.
Thank you, John. And Chris, tell us a little bit about TAGLaw.
Well, thanks. And largely the impetus for the creation of TAGLaw in 1998 is very similar to Meritas and Terralux, firms seeking confident and strong firms both nationally in the U.S., you know, for jurisdictions where they might not have offices or don't want to open offices, but also globally, which is one of the things we're known for. Wanted to just say hi to my shout out, Nick Lepore and Stan Smith, two of our managing partners who are on the call. I saw on the list that you circulated. Glad they're joining. We just came out with a new slogan, and we did a survey of our members, and we wanted to, sort of try to brand ourselves. We've been around for many years, almost more than 2 decades now, and the slogan that we sort of have determined is most appropriate is globally connected, locally respected, and that really speaks to the reputation of the firms that we have. They're firms that know their local market, and from listening to both Tanna and John, bigger isn't always better, and becoming a national firm isn't always the strategy that makes sense for clients, and maybe they want someone who's a local firm or a regional firm to help them as they grow, and they might not necessarily want to be tied directly to an international or a national firm. And I would say too, the other thing that differentiated us, as you mentioned earlier, John, is our connection to our accounting affiliation, TAG. It allows us to be really, truly different in the marketplace. We have 160 law firms, but we also add 120 accounting firms. So firms are able to give a full-service, multidisciplinary approach and help their clients connect with competent lawyers and accountants and advisors in over 100 countries around the world.
Excellent. I find that most firms are attracted to these networks for inbound referrals. That's what they want. But I interviewed, Tanna, your chair, I think it's a few terms removed, Andre Ryan in Montreal, who talked about the number one reason a firm should want to affiliate with a network is to offer its clients global representation and compete with national firms. So the inbound referrals will come, but the main reason to join one of these is to better serve existing clients. Tanna, would you speak to that a little bit before we move into our next topic?
This is basically the question here is what's the strategy of a firm in wanting to become part of a network? And what we find historically and today that the most important reason for a firm to become a member is to serve current clients. And it's to have a safe place to refer that would be almost like having a partner in another jurisdiction to service their clients. And if you look at it from the standpoint of building business, this is actually the most important aspect of creating new business for a firm, because clearly, over 80% of new business comes from current clients. So a network offers a way to offer an expanded services to an existing client. The other reasons that we see people joining our network is to position themselves in a market. Our firms are independent firms in their market, and they want to be able to position themselves with their clients vis-a-vis the other firms in their market, both global, regional, and local. And joining our network is a significant way to do that. The third reason is shared best practices. I was interviewing a firm in Bolivia yesterday, and they said one of the important pieces, and this is one of the top independent firms in that market, one of the most important reasons for them to become part of an organization like ours is to continue to learn from their peers their non-competitive peers in other markets and to build their business. And then finally, inbound is important. I mean, if we have close to 200 firms sending work to each other, that the inbound work is an important piece of the work. For many of our firms, we are 5 to 10% of their inbound business. So that is an important factor.
Okay. John, you ran a good-sized law firm out in Colorado, so you bring to our panel the perspective of a managing partner. And what do you think a law firm should be looking for in trying to determine whether or not, membership in a network is something they should pursue? What advice would you give a fellow managing partner who's weighing this question?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, there's strength in numbers, and building on what Tanna just said, it's important for your clients show them that you have these connections and you can take care of their work in different states and in different countries around the world. If you don't have that, you're probably going to lose them to somebody else. Not only a national or international firm, but a firm that has those connections. So I think it's important that you find your niche. Now, there are lots of law firm networks out there. There are networks in all sorts of specialty areas. And you have to find the right one for your firm and for your partners. And it could take some looking. You know, and a lot of the networks right now have firms that they're committed to. Most networks have at least territorial rights. A lot of times it's statewide, sometimes it's citywide, sometimes it's countrywide, depending on what sort of network you're looking at. Sometimes it's practice area oriented, but again, limited to one in a jurisdiction. So you'll have to do your homework if you're not in a network already. And I would encourage you to do that homework, because I think it's the wave of the future unless you're planning to go and be an international firm at this point.
So, John, is this kind of a no-brainer for most smaller and mid-sized law firms?
I would say it is. You know, Holland & Hart, 600 lawyers, but we have some smaller offices in Wyoming and other states. And, you know, we found that it's very helpful to have them in the network as well, because if a foreign company has an issue in Wyoming, you know, they're gonna call their law firm in New York and say, hey, who do you know in Wyoming? And if they're part of Terralux, they'll see, well, that's Holland & Hart in Cheyenne and Jackson Hole. And so we get the call. Otherwise, we wouldn't.
Chris, what advice might you give a firm leader listening in, assessing whether or not a network is right for his or her firm?
I think, you know, as you mentioned, there's 170 of these groups, and I think, you know, thinking big picture, I think the way business and just the global economy is changing, you know, it makes sense for your firm to have some type of global or national relationships that you can trust and you can get to know. The thing we tell our members and we tell firms that approach us and that we speak to, and I'm sure the two other panelists can mention this or can agree, is, you know, we're not just a list of firms. It's not just a website with a directory. These firms know each other. They trust each other. They attend events. They know each other personally. And from what, you know, our members have said, you know, firms, you know, partners who have been either accountants in big firms, national or international firms, or lawyers in big international firms, they say they know their TAGLaw or TAG counterparts in other offices and jurisdictions almost better than they know some of their partners when they were back in these bigger firms, just because of the culture, you know, of our group. And I'm sure that's shared across the board with other groups. So I think it's you know, what are you looking to get out? You know, you mentioned outbound referrals are important. They are, and that's what we encourage firms to really stress, and we really try not to create an expectation of what type of inbound work they're going to get. But what I tell firms once they come on board is the best way to get a referral is to give a referral. And what John said about, you know, telling your clients is so true. If your clients know that you have these connections and relationships, they're going to ask you if you promote that to them. And what better way to build a relationship and a two-way street than to send work to another firm? They're going to remember that. And so I think once you join, there's a lot that you have to do after that. So that's sort of the first step in a long journey.
Well, let me continue with you, Chris. You've sold me. We need to find a network. I'm convinced of it. How do we find the right one?
You know, I would say, you know, don't just pick the first one that you find. Go through your, you know, just like, you know, good lawyers make, you know, good firms. I would say, you know, do your research, create a list. And I would say even, you know, you might see that there's a network and they have someone in your territory. It doesn't hurt to approach them, because you might get some feedback or some information that could be beneficial, and it helps you sort of navigate those waters and really find out what you're looking for, because there might be a group that maybe the slot is already filled, but what they're offering is what you're looking for. So you have a horizon point that you can really sort of set your sights on and try to find a group that meets those. It could be based on practice area. There are a lot of networks that are focused on particular practice areas, employment law, international trade, what have you. It could be a niche type of network, and it might not be, one of the full service groups that TAGLaw, Terralex, and Meritas are. So, be creative. There's so many out there, and, ask questions and don't be afraid to do research, and you'll find a lot of great groups out there.
It's important to find a network of like firms in terms of my size and practice mix. Should that be a priority as I do my research?
Yeah, I mean, for groups like ours, I don't want to speak for the two others, but my guess is, full service is sort of our benchmark. So we want firms that have strong both corporate transactional practices, but also litigation. In some jurisdictions where we don't have that, we have two members. We have a corporate firm and we have a litigation firm. So really, you need to be amongst your peers, because otherwise you might receive a file and you might not be able to do it, or vice versa. So I think finding a group of your peers, and it's going to depend on what market you're in. The Pacific Northwest is a lot different than the Northeast of the United States. And vice versa. So firm sizes are going to be different depending on where you are, what part of the country you are. And, some of our bigger firms, are a couple hundred lawyers. And then we have some firms that are, a couple dozen lawyers. So it's going to really depend. But like we were talking about earlier, best practices are such a big part of what we do and what our members share. And that's really hard to sort of track on a referral sheet, talking about how you handle succession planning or compensation. Those are really intangible benefits that are meaningful, especially to managing partners. And just like Tanna had said, best practices, being able to talk with other people outside of your jurisdiction is very, very valuable.
John, I would add to that.
Yeah, Tanna, I'm going to come to you and ask what you might suggest to a firm that's convinced that you find one. How go do that?
Yeah. Well, I was going to add to what Chris said. Is one of the things is to look at what clients other firms have. Clearly the target market and the client base of a firm is what drives their business. And one of the things that we do when we're evaluating firms, and when our hope is that they evaluate us, is to look at the client base of the firms in the organization, because clearly not everybody is focused on the same target market. So that is a really key part. I think a huge part of it is the culture of the organization, and they are different. There is a common culture among all of the networks, but I think what we do is we actually ask our prospective members to talk to our current members to get a feel for what they actually experience with the organization, and I would suggest that's a very important part of the due diligence with regards to networks. And I think it's important for a firm to be very clear on why they are joining a network, and that will guide the decision to go with a practice group kind of network, a general practice network, or something that is even a regional network, like a Latin America region network that we see. And the one last comment is, you don't just need to join one network. You could be part of more than one for various reasons. However, one of the things that's critical, and this goes back to the engagement that Chris was talking about, and is that if you're going to make a commitment to join a network, it is critical to engage. If you don't engage in terms of participation in the network, in meetings, in practice groups or whatever, you will not achieve your objectives in the network. And when we evaluate our firms, part of our evaluation is their level of engagement, because we know that engagement is directly related to their the ability to build their businesses from the network.
Excellent. John, husband, anything to add to what Chris and Tanna have shared on how to find the right network?
Yeah, you asked the question, should you look for like-minded firms, and I think you definitely should. So Holland & Hart's a full-service firm, so that Terralux meets our needs because there are like-minded firms in Terralux that are very business-oriented, corporate-oriented. It wouldn't be good to have a member that, you know, is suing all the other firm's clients as a plaintiff. Yeah, and so we don't want to create those situations, so we are trying to find like-minded full-service firms. Another thing to look at, though, when you're trying to find the appropriate network, look at how they organize their practice groups. I think successful networks, and I've been in a couple through the years, have practice group-oriented, smaller groups that get together, and the more connections you can make with your member firms through specialty areas, the stronger your connection will be with the network and the more inbound and outbound referrals you'll receive. So I'd recommend that you check out the networks and see exactly what their activities are, how they organize them, how many standalone meetings they have with their practice groups. One of the things that we've found very beneficial at Terralux is we have a managing partners group. And the managing partners get together twice a year and talk about all sorts of things. Some of it Terralux related, but most of it related to how do you run a law firm, business-oriented law firm in this day and age. And, you know, I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm doing member reviews right now for North America. And uniformly, the managing partners say they value that. They've made good friends. They've made contacts with people who they can just call and say, hey, I've got this issue. What do you think about this? And they get good advice from their friends, their newfound friends. So I would look at those things as well.
Excellent advice. You know, the more my observations are that the more established networks like the three of yours are pretty well full in North America, and but that doesn't mean the seat's not available. So if you're in Mississippi and you think Terralux is the network for you, no reason, even though they already have a Mississippi member firm, you shouldn't reach out and say, hey, might there be an opportunity here? Because I find that the more established networks are really looking to sort of upgrade their memberships, if you will, and so these seats are in play. So just because someone's already there doesn't mean they're locked in. I see a lot of these upstart networks as well, and it seems many of them are just willing to take a check, and if your check clears the bank, you're in the network. So certainly there would be some advantages to joining a more established network, but do your due diligence. Tanna, I think your point is very good. Look around, do your due diligence, talk to member firms, show up at a meeting, check it out. Once you think you've found the right one, you've got to jump in and engage, and you'll get out of it what you put into it. Let's say we found our network, and we're plugging in. And I'm going to do around the table here. How do we generate the most value through our participation? John, I'm going to start with you as a managing partner. What sort of things did you do to achieve value through your network participation? What's important to do?
Yeah, the very first thing, and Tanna hit on some of the points I'll make in a second, but the very first thing you have to do is get your partners on board with the idea. If you don't get buy-in in your firm that you're going to join this network, it's going to cost money, it's going to take up time, and it's going to take commitment, and you don't get buy-in on that, it's not going to work. So that's the number one thing. Then I agree totally with Tanna. You have to go to the meetings, you have to get active, you have to volunteer. You know, if your network has a newsletter, you got to get your partners writing on it. If they ask for speakers at practice groups, you got to have them speaking. Your member reps and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but your member reps have to get to know the key players in the organization, and they have to try to get into a leadership role. The more leaders you have in the network, the stronger the referrals in and out will be. Become a practice group leader, run for the board of directors, but make that commitment. If you do those things, you'll find it to be very, very valuable.
I'm going to jump ahead to our next question, since you already alluded to it a bit, John. And how do you figure out which lawyers should be your representatives to the network?
Yeah, it's maybe the most important decision you'll make after you've decided you want to be in a network, and it should be made very carefully. There's a lot of politics involved in your firms. Let's face it, whoever you pick is going to be looked at, and other partners may be jealous. But you have to pick somebody that clearly is a good lawyer, first of all. Hopefully somebody that's recognized by, super lawyers and best lawyers and chambers, so they come in with a reputation, but also somebody that's outgoing and friendly and connects with people quickly. But most important, somebody that has a strong business development personality. Those are the types of things you're looking for. I will tell a little story here. Holland and Hart hosted in Denver the Terralux international meeting. And I was the chairman at Holland and Hart at the time. And the head of Terralux came up to me and said, "Hey, your member rep really isn't cutting it." And I kind of looked at him and go, "What are you talking about?" Because I hadn't been active in Terralux at the time. And he told me some things. And so I made the change, which is not an easy thing to do if you're a managing partner, but I made the change, and we've seen the results as that change has been made, and it's been really extremely positive, and our participation has been much greater. So it really is an important decision.
Should it be the same people meeting after meeting, or do we spread it around among our representatives to the network?
I feel very strongly in this, and it's from experience. You have to have the same rep going year after year after year. So you need to find somebody that will be committed to it, and we'll make those trips each year. We'll renew those contacts. We'll get to know people. If you go once or twice and then don't go for 5 years, and then you go once or twice, you don't make the connections, you don't make the friendships, you don't earn the trust that you need to make these things successful.
Tanna, anything you might add in terms of how a firm selects which of its lawyers participate in the network?
John was, from my opinion, right on in terms of picking someone who shows up well, represents the firm well, is well respected within the firm, and has a knack for business development. And the most difficult thing I find firms when they are making the decision about who should represent them is to realize that not all partners are created equal, that there are clearly partners that may have more status but not have the skills that make a good representative of their firm in a network. What we ask our firm, and this is clearly a firm decision, but what we ask is that the contacts that are representing firms do take the action to create awareness within their firms, within their lawyers, within their partnership and associates on how to use Meritas. And I'm very, very clear on using the organization. That's what we're about, and to help the people in the lawyers in their firms use our organization to build their practices. And we rely on the key contacts that the firm has, in addition to myself and other people on our staff, to help carry that message out to the lawyers in the firm.
will you help a firm if it's not sending the right people to your meetings and conferences? Will you say something to the firm?
Yes, we will. We actually have, as part of our recertification process that happens every 3 years, a member contact evaluation component, and we call our contacts member contacts, and that gives us a focus and opportunity to bring up issues that we may have with member contacts. We do find that there are firms in certain parts of the world that make their key contact perhaps a founding lawyer that's not currently involved in the business because of the honor that it is, and it's difficult sometimes to bring that up and to say, you know, this is a working job. This is a job on someone who will engage in the organization, will respond to requests for referral requests, will help do things, and it's not an honorary job. And so it's a difficult conversation, but yes, we do that.
I share a story. It's a true story. A firm in the upstate of New York, its representative to the network, and it's one of yours, was 82 years old. And, you know, I remember going to meet the firm for the first time. He fell asleep during the meeting, and apparently that's not an uncommon situation. And this is the face of the firm to its network. And my suggestion was, can you put a better face to the network? Because I don't think you're taking full advantage of this opportunity. But it was firm politics, seniority, that historical book of business. This 82-year-old was their face to the network. And yeah, tough decisions here. And don't let politics necessarily, you got to be sensitive to the politics, but you need your best horses out there too.
Well, I think this is
all the things you say.
What we see is the whole idea of succession planning within a firm is a very difficult conversation, and it's not only true about firm management and the turnover or the appropriate turnover of partners in a firm, but it's also succession planning for the people that represent them in their various partnerships, including their networks.
Do your networks have a young lawyers groups within them?
I'll answer that.
I'll ask that of you.
Yep. Yeah, we started in 2011 a young lawyer, asking every firm to identify a young lawyer, and we did that because we had done a good bit of market research with our firms, younger lawyers, on how we could engage them in the network and learn from them on the next generation of how referral will happen in the legal profession. And what they came back to us with was the idea of identifying a young lawyer in each firm, because they wanted to be able to have a peer in firms that they could ask stupid questions to, and not necessarily a managing partner. The result of that, I can say that was wildly successful. We have now 200 or 300 young lawyers that do business together that are teaching us how they're going to refer. And a young lawyer definition is between 3 and 7 years in the practice of law. We also now have a young lawyer advisory board that is actually very oriented to advising us on various initiatives that we have, and they also actually do initiatives on their own and make presentations at our meetings to the rest of the organization.
Terrific. So many, John, you talked about the managing partners group within Terralex, the young lawyers group here within Meritas. This is great stuff. Chris, anything that you want to add here as a firm assesses how we plug in, getting the right people involved in the networks?
Yeah, there's just like both Tanna and John said, there's multiple levels. Of course, you have your principal contacts, and we require that each firm have at least 2, and most of our firms in the U.S. have 3 principal contacts that are, sort of the liaisons for the relationship, the ones who go to the international conferences. But what we have throughout the year is we have multiple regional meetings that take place. We have and a lot of our firms will send younger partners as part of their succession planning to these regional meetings. We're in the heart of regional meeting season right now, so that's taking place as we speak. And then a couple other things too. We have really strong relationships with the marketing directors and the firm administrators at our firms. I know personally both the marketing directors for the two members who are on the call, the member firms who are on the call, and have had conversations with them. I'm in contact with them regularly. They send us news. So when you start that relationship, or if you're already a member of a group, I encourage you to reach out to the administration or the executive team there and say, how can we get more involved? Because my guess is they probably have a host of things. We even do things, and I'm sure Terralex and Meritas do this as well, for the International Bar Association or for INTA, the International Trademark Association. We will have meetings and lunches or receptions for our members who get together there. And what we find is usually those aren't the main contacts for TAGLaw, because TAGLaw is their international touch, but the trademark lawyers or the trade lawyers, they're members of IBA and INTA because that's their touch to the outside world. And so we try to get them with other members in the group to encourage those relationships, and it really benefits the firm as a whole. The more people in the firm who know, we encourage firms to put something about TAGLaw in their new hire materials. So when a new associate or a new lateral comes on, if you do an acquisition, day one they're seeing TAGLaw in front of them, and they're able to identify that as a resource that they have access to.
Excellent, thank you. Now let's get to some tough stuff, and I'm going to come to you, John. And that's the inbound referral comes in the door, and how do we handle the origination credit, if at all? You've got lawyers investing considerable amounts of time in this network, perhaps perceived by other lawyers at the firm as going off to boondoggles in Vienna and other places. A little resentment, little jealousy. What advice might you give to how we handle that inbound referral, how we give origination credit to it?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question. It's one that law firms struggle with, but I think there's really only one solution in the end. If you have an eat what you kill environment, it's hard to implement this. Because then you do have people hoarding origination credit. But partners do look at one another with suspicion. They do look at the reps to these organizations as going to all those cool places. And
while I'm home working.
Yeah, well, you're home working.
Mm-hmm.
You're paying for him to go off on a boondoggle.
Go play golf. Right.
Right. And that's how it's viewed by probably the majority of the partners, when really it's not. If you've been involved in these groups, it takes some effort, and if you're going to be active and be good at it, it's going to take a whole lot of commitment. And you're going to be in meetings. When I go to the meetings, I'm start early in the morning and end late at night, and it's
hard
all
work.
day. Mm-hmm. It is, if you're doing it right. I think that you need to give origination credit to the attorney who actually does the work. The call will come into you as the rep, but you've got to pass that origination credit off. You've got to give it to the partner you're assigning the work to at that point. But you need at that same time to say, hey, this is a Terralux referral. We have strict guidelines on how you're going to deal with this. You're going to treat this client as a most favored client and give them prompt service. But you get the origination credit, you run with it, just make sure you do it right. And let me know in the end how it all goes. And I find that makes it better for everybody. Your partners then will realize that, okay, he's doing a service for the firm. He's passing the origination credit. He's not hogging it. This is a good thing for our firm. So I'm a strong believer in that, by the way.
Excellent. Tanna, what advice do you give your member firms on how we handle credit for inbound matters?
We actually we let them know that the firms that do best in Meritas have two ways. One is the way that John described. So to to give the origination credit to the production attorney. And that way you have a good motivation on the production attorneys to give best client status and practice to that firm and priority to that particular matter. The other way,
their support for the firm's participation in the network, even though they're not going to the meetings, they're getting something out of it.
Right. The second way that our firms do it is some of the firms take the origination credit as a firm credit and do not change their production credits at all. And for some firms, given their culture, that works okay. The downside of that is there's no motivation for the production attorney to treat that matter any differently, and in fact there may be a disincentive because they're not even getting any kind of credit that it has to do with the founding of that matter or any future carry-on credit that comes as a result of that client. So we, in early days of networks, I do need to say that many times the contact did get origination credit, and we still have some firms that operate that way, and we are proactively recommending to them that they change.
Interesting. Chris, anything to add?
I would agree. I mean, all of those are good ideas, and Tanna, said a word that I think is really sort of dictating is culture. And one of the managing partners at one of our managing partner meetings said it best. He said, "Compensation creates culture," and I think we all know that's true in law firms. And so, whatever you pick has to match your culture, or it has to match what you're trying to make your culture to be. If you don't like your current culture in regards to compensation, so. I think you need to gather all the facts. I think you need to talk with other members and see what they do, see what they, try and find firms that are like you or, within the organization. And, just like you had said, pick up the phone, call those managing partners, ask those questions, because I think there's multiple ways to handle it, and it's going to really depend on who's involved and ultimately what you're looking to get out of your relationship.
Okay. We're sort of coming up toward the top of the hour, and I'm going to back up and ask kind of a big picture question of you guys. You know what's going out on the marketplace for legal services, have a good kind of perspective. And I'll start with Chris on this question as to what you see as your member firm's biggest challenges out there in the evolving marketplace for legal services.
I think it's succession planning and diversity. So I think, we've seen a lot of firms, acquiring firms, and they've been, fortunate to be sort of on the acquisition side. But we've also seen some firms who have been acquired, who have merged in, and in most cases we're able to retain the membership and get to know the new firm. That's always good. But sometimes it doesn't always work out like that, and the acquiring firm might have an existing relationship. So under a last in first out mentality, they might have to sunset their membership. But I think just overall succession planning is just a huge challenge, and I think it speaks to diversity as well, because I think diversity is not just I don't think skin or ethnicity. It's also age and gender. And I think from what we read and what we see when we put together panels is clients want their law firms to be like them. And most corporations, most companies are diverse. They have diversity initiatives. And so the traditional, composition of a law firm is not necessarily the reality in the business world today. And so clients really want and really value firms who are diverse and who are progressive. And so the past year, a lot of our program at our conferences is really focused on these two topics, the generation gap. What can firms do to put themselves in a position to both recruit and retain top talent, to make their firms attractive places for young people who are going to then, make their firms viable in the future.
And are you all doing anything at TAGLaw specifically to help your member firms through succession planning and diversity? You mentioned those as the top two issues you see your member firms struggling with. What are you guys doing to help them out with that?
Yeah, so we've had at our two most recent conferences, we've had women in leadership sessions, which have been really good, to really just talk about these issues, to create, because I think before we come up with solutions, these issues have to be talked about, they have to be discussed, we have to gather the facts, we have to get their perspective. So we've had these women in leadership sessions. We've talked about succession planning, both at our conferences, in our Managing Partner Summit, and we've partnered with various consultants and coaches who, through our Friends of TAG program, who can help these firms, craft these strategies to really, fix these problems or identify problems that they might not even know exist. And we have some firms who have, who are leaders in the country in terms of diversity and succession planning. So putting them in a position where they have a pulpit to be able to speak about what they've done, I think is also beneficial because it creates thought leadership, it creates respect, and it allows those firms who are doing it well to shine. And that's important because we could talk about it, as outsiders, but to get the real goal, I think, and we've talked about it's been a theme throughout this session is, getting members meeting each other, talking to each other, building those relationships. Those are key. That's what's going to, any network is just as strong or just as weak as the relationships inside of it. So that's really important.
Excellent. Thank you. Tanna, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing your member firms?
I'm going to take it more from the macroeconomic point of view in what I see. I see clients demanding a significant increase in productivity of the legal profession that they're not necessarily seeing delivered. Technology allows today, whether it's research, whether it's repetitive contract work, it allows and does a better job than us humans do at a lot of things that have traditionally been fee-earning aspects of the legal profession. Clients know that. They're implementing a lot of that, and I think they're seeing a lot of law firms being very slow at implementing technology to improve productivity. I think that's a big deal. That's why we see a lot of growth in the in-house market, because they feel that they can do things more economically and more easily in-house, and law firms aren't delivering that. I see that as a huge challenge for law firms, and it conflicts with the billable hour kind of business model that has been traditionally most of our firms. The second thing I see is new entrants into the market. I was just at our Asian meeting in Singapore. We had 4 new non-law firm entrants speak to us about the transformation in the legal profession. In that part of the world, it's much more open, and they are directly competing. They are businesses that are directly competing with law firms. And that will be something that's very real. I've seen that in other professions, and I think we will see it in the legal profession. And I think the third thing that's more operational is cybersecurity. Clearly that's killed some law firms recently, but I think that will be an issue that our clients will be demanding that law firms address in a very, very proactive way.
Interesting. You talked about the non-law firms. I'm going to end with that question, go around the panel on what you think of multidisciplinary practices coming to the United States. But John, anything to add? What do you see as sort of the main issues that your member firms are challenged with in this evolving market?
Yeah, if you look at the numbers, and I know all the managing partners on this call look at the numbers, that's the number one thing. The Citigroup surveys I find very informative. They come out every quarter. It's clear the trends are that there's less work now and there's more competition. And the competition is coming from a lot of non-traditional places. It's not just other law firms. The biggest competitor I would fear for lawyers are the accounting firms. They came in big about a decade ago and failed utterly and miserably. They're not gonna mess up the second time around, and they're coming in big and they're hiring a lot of people right now. So, you have to be on the lookout for that. But also other non-legal service providers are out there, and they're doing a lot of the work that the big law firms used to do before. A lot of the litigation support work, a lot of the document review on corporate transactions. They can do that, and they can do it a lot more efficiently than the law firms can. And in fact, the corporate clients are demanding that they do that. You don't even have a choice of who you're going to work with anymore on those issues because the company has that relationship. So there's going to be more competition. I find that the pressure on billing rates is a huge challenge right now. We used to just raise billing rates. We lived in a Gilded Age where we could just raise billing rates every year to make sure that our partners were paid appropriately. We can't do that anymore. There's a lot of pressure on that, and yet at the same time, our expenses continue to ratchet up. The Fed raised the interest rate today. Well, what's that going to do? Salaries are going up, rents are going up, all the costs of doing business have gone up. And then, the last thing I would point to that I think is going to have the biggest impact going forward is artificial intelligence. This technology is going to change everything, in my view. And a lot of the firms that rely on associates and contract lawyers are going to find they don't need as many now. That artificial intelligence, Ross, I've seen a demonstration of the Ross system. You can ask Ross a question, he gives you the pros and the cons, and then gives you a summary of all that law in no time at all. It used to take an associate a day to put all that together. Ross just spits it right out at us. So that's going to continue to accelerate as we move forward. So those are the biggest challenges I see.
A lot going on out there, certainly. Changes all around. And I think, Tanna, you mentioned that most firms are pretty slow to adapt. Lawyers aren't comfortable in change and uncertainty, ambiguity. But these are changing times. And I believe, leadership, a strategic plan. I think the networks are a great place to find community and solutions and to help you be a more effective and viable, profitable law firm going forward. Multidisciplinary practices. John, you talked about the accounting firms coming in here. You think it's inevitable that in the United States we'll see non-lawyer ownership of law firms?
Yeah, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of time.
Tanna, would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. It's an economic force. I mean, John called it the Gilded Age of the legal profession. I would call it a virtuous cycle that's happened over the last 30 years. I've been in a number of businesses and never seen one that can raise their rates at more than the consumer price index for 30 years straight. And the reality is that prices go down rather than up, given the improvements in technology. So, and we've seen what happens in markets where there is other ownership. In Australia, we see consolidation of the market. In the UK, we see very interesting new ways of doing business, and new firms popping up outside London to do things for half the price of the London firms. So I do see that the U.S. uniquely has a lot more regulation and protectionism, even at a state level. So it'll probably happen state by state would be my guess, but it'll be interesting to see how that evolves.
And Chris, I'll bet you've got some member firms that are accounting and law firms over in over in Europe or else in other jurisdictions. Do you see MDPs coming to the U.S. shores in the foreseeable future?
In the foreseeable future, I don't think it's on our doorstep. I agree with what Tanna said. I think it's going to be, there's a lot of protectionism, and I do think it's going to be a state issue. I think it's going to be something that is just highly fought against, and I think there's going to have to be some type of a watershed moment that pushes states to change those ethics rules. What we see is, France, Germany, in Southeast Asia, all throughout Europe, we do see multidisciplinary groups. We have some who are both members of TAGLaw and TAIAG, The interesting thing is our most recent Managing Partner Summit, we invited CEOs and managing partners from accounting firms to attend. And overwhelmingly, the feedback was these managing partners, these CEOs of these accounting firms are so smart and they've run such successful businesses. All the law firm managing partners said, we need to be learning from you guys because it's so different in an accounting firm. It's run just like a business rather than a partnership. And there was great value in that multidisciplinary exposure where the lawyer managing partners were able to see, wow, that's really interesting. Their use of technology, investing in the future, and automation and things like that are all things the accounting firms are doing. You know, the big fours investing billions of dollars in artificial intelligence for audits and things, and you know, a lot of the big law firms are doing that with Ross. And so I think it helps to talk to your peers, but I think it also helps to talk to other people in other professions, because I think there's a lot of knowledge and value that people can gain, and that's why you know, our group is unique and interesting because we have that multidisciplinary aspect.
Excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today, and I want to thank our panel for what I thought was a really interesting conversation. And I think Chris, John, Tanna would be willing to entertain a phone call, an email from anyone if you have any questions, some follow-up. And I do want to thank each of you for giving up a part of your day to be with us. Thanks to our panel. And let me kick it back to Dalen for some wrap-up, and have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks so much for your participation. As we mentioned before, these sessions are recorded and will be archived on the MPF website, managingpartnerforum.org. As always, we value your feedback about this session and your input for future programs. Please be sure to complete the brief online survey. Thanks again for your attendance this afternoon. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.